The Russian Civil War was a pivotal event in the early 20th century. It took place from 1917 to 1923. This war was a struggle for control of Russia's future. The conflict had deep social, political, and economic impacts. The war followed the Russian Revolution of 1917, which overthrew the Tsarist autocracy. Different groups vied for power after this overthrow. The main factions were the Bolsheviks, known as the Reds, and the anti-Bolsheviks, known as the Whites. Each group had different visions for Russia's future. The Russian Civil War was not just a battle within Russia, it drew in foreign powers. Countries like Britain, France, and Japan got involved. They wanted to stop the spread of Bolshevism. The Civil War's outcome would shape global politics for decades to come. The war also had a huge human cost. Millions of people died or were displaced. The conflict devastated cities and the countryside. Understanding this war helps us understand modern Russia. It shows how the nation became what it is today. The February Revolution began in 1917. It started with mass protests in Petrograd, now known as St. Petersburg. People were angry about food shortages and World War I. The Tsarist regime was unable to handle these issues. The protests quickly turned into a full-scale revolution. Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate, marking the end of the Romanov dynasty. A provisional government took over, made up of liberals and moderate socialists. They promised to continue fighting in World War I. The provisional government faced many challenges. They struggled to gain support from the people. Their decision to stay in the war was unpopular. Many Russians were tired of the ongoing conflict and its hardships. This discontent provided an opportunity for the Bolsheviks. The February Revolution set the stage for further upheaval. It created a power vacuum. Various political groups aimed to fill this vacuum. The most organized and determined of these were the Bolsheviks. They saw the provisional government as weak and ineffective. Their time to act would soon come. The October Revolution occurred later in 1917. It was led by the Bolshevik Party, a radical socialist group. Their leader was Vladimir Lenin. They promised peace, land, and bread to the war-weary Russian people. The Bolsheviks planned a coup against the provisional government. On October 25th, they seized key locations in Petrograd. They took over government buildings, the telegraph office, and the Winter Palace. The provisional government was overthrown with little resistance. After the coup, the Bolsheviks established a new government. They called it the Soviet government, with Lenin becoming the head of this new regime. The Bolsheviks withdrew Russia from World War I. They signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in 1918. This move was controversial but popular among many Russians. The October Revolution was a turning point. It marked the beginning of Bolshevik rule in Russia. The Bolsheviks faced immediate opposition. Various factions, including the White Army, opposed their authority. This opposition would soon lead to a brutal civil war. The Russian Civil War was fought between several factions. The main groups were the Red Army and the White Army. Other groups also played significant roles. These included the Greens, the anarchists, and various nationalist movements. The Red Army was the military force of the Bolsheviks. It was led by Leon Trotsky. The Red Army aimed to defend the Soviet government. They used guerrilla tactics and propaganda. Their goal was to spread Bolshevik ideology across Russia. The White Army consisted of anti-Bolshevik forces, including monarchists, nationalists, and liberals. The Whites had diverse goals. Some wanted to restore the monarchy, while others aimed to establish a democratic government. They received support from foreign powers like Britain and France. Other groups added complexity to the war. The Greens were peasant forces who fought both Reds and Whites to protect their land. Anarchists like Nestor Makhno's Black Army fought for a stateless society. Nationalist movements sought independence for regions like Ukraine and Finland. Section 5. Key battles and turning points in the Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War featured many critical battles. Some of these battles were turning points. They determined the course of the conflict. The war's first major battle was the fight for Kazan in 1918. The Red Army's victory there was crucial for Bolshevik morale. Another key battle was the Siege of Tsaritsyn, now known as Volgograd. This took place from 1918 to 1920. The city's defense was led by Joseph Stalin. The Reds' victory secured the Volga River. This was vital for maintaining supply lines. The Battle of Omsk was another significant event. Omsk was a stronghold of the White Army. In 1919, the Red Army captured the city. This defeat shattered the White forces in Siberia. It marked a turning point in the war. The final major battle was the Siege of Perekop in 1920. This battle decided the fate of Crimea. The Red Army defeated the White forces, forcing them to flee. The victory at Perekop effectively ended the civil war. The Bolsheviks had secured their control over Russia. Section 6. The role of foreign powers in the Russian Civil War. Foreign powers played a significant role in the Russian Civil War. Several countries intervened. They aimed to stop the spread of Bolshevism. Allied forces, including Britain, France, and the United States, sent troops. They supported the White Army. Japan also intervened. They occupied parts of Siberia. Their goal was to expand their influence in the region. Foreign intervention complicated the war. It added another layer to the conflict. Foreign troops fought alongside the Whites. They provided weapons and supplies. Foreign intervention had mixed results. It did not lead to a decisive victory for the Whites. Instead, it fueled anti-foreign sentiment. Many Russians saw the intervention as an invasion. This boosted support for the Bolsheviks. The foreign powers eventually withdrew. Their involvement had little lasting impact. The Bolsheviks emerged victorious despite foreign opposition. The Civil War showed the limits of foreign intervention. It also demonstrated the resilience of the Bolshevik forces. Section 7. The human cost of the Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War had a devastating human cost. Millions of people died. Many were soldiers, but civilians suffered greatly too. The war caused widespread famine and disease. The fighting disrupted food supplies. Starvation became a major issue. Entire communities were displaced. People fled their homes to escape the violence. Cities and towns were destroyed. The countryside was ravaged. Infrastructure was damaged. The war left a trail of destruction across Russia. The human cost extended beyond death and displacement. The war traumatized the population. People faced constant fear and uncertainty. Families were torn apart. The social fabric of Russia was severely damaged. Rebuilding would take years. The Bolsheviks implemented harsh policies. They conducted purges and executions. They targeted political opponents and suspected traitors. These actions added to the human toll. The Civil War was not just a military conflict, it was a social and humanitarian crisis. Section 8. Outcomes of the Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War ended with a Bolshevik victory. The Red Army defeated the White forces. This victory secured Bolshevik control over Russia. The Soviet government established a one-party state. They implemented socialist policies. The war led to significant territorial changes. The Soviet Union was formed in 1922. It included Russia and several other republics. The Bolsheviks aimed to create a classless society. They nationalized industry and redistributed land. The Civil War also had economic consequences. The conflict devastated the Russian economy. Infrastructure was damaged. The Bolsheviks introduced the New Economic Policy, or NEP, in 1921. This policy aimed to revive the economy. It allowed some private enterprise. The war's outcome had global implications. It influenced the spread of communism. The Bolshevik victory inspired communist movements worldwide. The Russian Civil War shaped the 20th century. It set the stage for the Cold War and the global ideological struggle between communism and capitalism. Section 9. Long-term effects and historical significance of the Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War had lasting effects. It shaped modern Russia. The Bolsheviks consolidated power. They laid the foundation for the Soviet Union. The war influenced Soviet policies and governance. It also impacted Russian society and culture. The Civil War had global significance. It marked the rise of communism as a major political force. The Bolshevik victory inspired revolutionary movements. It created a model for communist revolutions elsewhere. The Russian Civil War was a precursor to the global spread of communism. The war also affected international relations. It contributed to the Cold War. The Soviet Union's emergence as a superpower was rooted in the Civil War. The conflict influenced the geopolitical landscape for decades. The Russian Civil War is a key chapter in world history. It was a battle for the future of Russia and beyond. Understanding this conflict helps us understand modern geopolitics. The war's legacy continues to shape our world today.